Throwing Stones tells the story of a gay teen, Jesse Bryce, who lives in a small town in southeastern Oklahoma. Just outside the town is a community of pagans. The townspeople misunderstand, ridicule, and castigate the pagans, whom they refer to as villagers or people from the village. Jesse, just barely out of the closet to a family and close friends, feels ostracized in his own community. Because of this, he identifies with the pagans, and in fact, he's developed a crush on Griffin Holyoke, a boy from the village. Just before Halloween, Griffin had rescued a black cat from two boys who were trying to capture it and use it for a Halloween prank. Another black cat was mutilated and left at the high school entrance, and Griffin got blamed by townsfolk who think the pagans did things like that. Jesse knows they don't. He had just spied on the pagan community to see what they did for Halloween, which is a high holy day for pagans. They call it Samhain. At the start of Jesse's spying adventure, Griffin had seen him and had invited him to join in the celebrations, but Jesse had pretended he was leaving to go home. Instead, he hid in the woods and watched. The eeriest thing Jesse saw was when they walked in a circle around a large bonfire as they chanted strange phrases. The first scene I'll read takes place during the first half of a high school football game in November. I got bored somewhere in the middle of the first half and told Dad I was going to go talk to some kids in my class. A lie. Not many kids in my class talk to me these days, or maybe it's me who doesn't talk to them. Telling myself that I wasn't lonely and that I actually enjoyed this marginalization, another lie, I wandered around the uninhabited top rows of the bleachers for a bit, examined the overcast sky in vain for rain, examined the crowd in vain for a sign of any Holyoke, and eventually I worked my way down to the ground and under the bleachers. Had I known about the show down here, I would have descended sooner. There were 3 couples, all boy-girl, of course, in different corners from where I was, making out big time. A few articles of clothing had body parts more on them than in them. At first, this carnality captured all my attention, but then I noticed there was someone across from me, sitting on the ground at the other end of the bleachers, also watching the show. Griffin Holyoke. He saw me looking at him and grinned. As I watched in disbelief, he got up and came around the edge of the space toward me, careful not to call attention to himself or disturb any of the activity. He leaned against the other side of the support post I was leaning on, and although we were both looking at the show, all my attention was on him. Maybe 5 minutes went by, and one couple was, I swear, very close to ultimate consummation, when I heard Griffin's voice, low and silky. It's amazing how fascinating something so repetitive can be, don't you think? And he turned to look at me. My eyes caught on the silver ring pierced through his right eyebrow. Not having a clue how to respond, I just shrugged. He said, "Not a big sports fan?" I shook my head. "Me neither. I just come for this show." "You what?" He smiled and jerked his chin toward the couples. "Never miss a game." He watched my face as I tried to keep my eyes from widening too obviously. "You had enough yet, Jesse? Want to go someplace we can talk?" Did I ever? We sat on the ground behind the bleachers, the sounds of the game present but not front and center, and shredded grass blades. I couldn't think of anything to say, and my pile grew faster than his. Finally he leaned back, elbows supporting him from behind. "I don't want you to think it's a problem or anything," he told me, looking around at nothing in particular, "but I know you hung around on Samhain after I saw you." Samhain? Oh, right, Halloween. "You can ask me about it if you want. I don't mind that you're curious." I was more curious how he knew I had hung around. I'd been careful to stay hidden, but I decided against going there. I thought back to that night, and my thoughts landed on the fire. It wasn't especially odd that someone would have a bonfire on Halloween, but what I'd seen had been more than a bunch of people having a fun fire. I asked, "What was that chanting about at the fire where you burned the cornstalks?" "Fire is transformative. It changes one kind of matter into another through energy. Samhain is the border between one thing and another, so the fire represents this transformation. And, of course, it's the end of the harvest season, when the old cornstalks have done their job, and cold weather is coming on. Now that we have corn, what we need is warmth. So fire transforms food production into heat. We were expressing gratitude to corn and to fire." I was actually a little surprised that he was prepared to be so specific about this stuff, so I asked another question. "But I heard something about chaos and a doorway for the dead." He nodded. "It's like the Christian tradition All Saints' Day, only the church changed it from All Souls' Day, which is what it used to be. It's a brief time, a few hours, between what was and what will be, for the dead to walk with the living." "Okay, creepy. And the chaos?" He laughed. "Well, it's a pretty chaotic picture, don't you think? Dead people walking around with the living? And when the time is up, things have to go back to normal again." I was almost afraid to ask this, but it seemed unavoidable. "Do you know who killed that black cat on Halloween, the one they found at the school?" As a matter of fact, I have my suspicions, but I don't know for sure. All I know is it wasn't me. That was a relief, even if I hadn't believed he'd done it. But there was a related question I needed an answer to. And do you, worship the devil or anything? He scowled. Jesse, you saw everything we did on your Halloween. That would have been the time for that kind of ridiculousness. Did you see or hear anything about a devil or a demon, anything like that? Well, no, exactly. Pagans don't even acknowledge this concept you refer to as the devil. So, but are you Christian? No, pagan. Paganism predates Christianity, and Christianity stole a lot of the pagan traditions and rituals when it was busy trying to convert everyone in Europe. The whole evergreen thing, the Yule log, giving presents and singing carols and picking bright red holly berries, those are all pagan traditions. Christians stole them. He sounded almost like there was anger in there someplace. I didn't think it was directed at me exactly, but I didn't want him to be angry. I went back to Samhain and did my best to sound like I had taken what he'd said seriously. So, have you ever seen any of the souls who came through the doorway? He relaxed again. Not me, no. Not yet, anyway. But my sister did last year. Grandma came to her. Selena, that's my sister, was thinking of moving to San Francisco. She'd fallen in love with Parker Harrison, and Parker's parents had kicked him out when he came out to them. He moved to California, and he asked Selena to go with him. Grandma told Selena she should follow her heart. So she did. This made no sense to me. I thought Parker Harrison was a girl. Parker identifies as genderqueer. He grew up as a girl, but he transitioned in his late teens. Now, people who meet him for the first time see him as a man. Transitioned? Like sex change? Griffin shook his head. No, just started living life as a man lives life. Clothing, typical actions, haircut, that sort of thing. I still wasn't able to make a lot of sense out of this. So how does Selena see him? As Parker. I thought he'd say more, but he didn't. I don't know what that means. Is Selena gay or not? Griffin's smile was cryptic. She's bisexual. As she put it, I fell in love with the person, not the plumbing. Wow. Wow. Your folks don't mind? Mind what? That she moved away? About her being bisexual. One side of his mouth curled up in a half smile. You Christians, you get upset over the silliest things. I could feel my heart beating faster. If pagans were so open about this, and if Griffin was gay, there was hope for me with him. In fact, saying something about me seemed like the best way to find out about him. It was an opening, and all I had to do was say, you know I'm gay, right? But I hesitated too long, and it got awkward. My next thoughts were to wonder whether the Harrisons were more upset that Parker was genderqueer, or that he had taken up with a villager. Because even if Griffin were a girl, I know my folks wouldn't want me to get involved with him because he is from the village. But instead I moved to a related but safer subject. So under the bleachers there, you come here a lot? He laughed at my facetious use of the cliché, and I relaxed a little. Sure, sex is great. I'm still trying to understand why it's so fascinating and how the spiritual aspects come into it. Dad says I'm still too testosterone poisoned to see through the fog of cum, and it will be a while before I can balance things out. Wow, his dad talks to him like that, really? I set that aside in favor of something he'd said about sex that puzzled me. Okay, you'll have to explain that to me. I mean, I get the idea of being with someone you love, but spiritual? Sure, it's like... Well, my dad says it's like being so close, not just physically, but also spiritually, that during the physical act, there's this compelling desire to actually become one being. And, I mean, as pagans, we see the diversity around us, but really we see it all as only part of the picture. Because we're all one with the goddess, ultimately. Well, in my kind of paganism, anyway. Not all pagan practices revolve around a goddess figure. But anyway, the spiritual part of sex is like having a taste of that feeling, of being one with everything, but with one person at a time. That feeling I'd had in my dream when Griffin and I had kissed washed over me in a huge wave. Maybe that was the spiritual aspect. But I wasn't about to bring that up. And I wasn't prepared to discuss goddesses either. So I stayed with what I could connect with. Man, I can't believe you and your dad talk about it like that. Or at all. I mean, when my dad told me about, the birds and the bees, he didn't go into a lot of detail, and he didn't talk about anything spiritual. I think he mentioned love, but that was it. What a weird expression, the birds and the bees. What the hell is that supposed to mean anyway? It's just avoiding saying what you're really talking about. Sex is good, Jesse. Sex is something you should want, something you should enjoy. I had to ask, have you ever done it? Only with myself so far, but when I'm 18, my dad says he'll talk to me about what my mom taught him. This blew my mind on so many levels I wasn't sure which one to focus on. I landed on the angle that seemed to spell disaster for my hopes. You mean about sex with a woman? Of course. Well, of course, for me, that is. Interesting that you would ask. Are you more interested in sex with a man? So he didn't know. Do it fast, Jessie. Just rip off the Band-Aid. Yes. He nodded. Good to know. And you don't mind? He laughed again, and I was beginning to really love that sound, even if he was interested in women, not men. Not me. Not as long as you don't try and make out with me, no. In fact, it lessens the competition. Every guy who's gay is one less guy I have to compete with for straight girls.